Allora, who is here? My name is Bertrand Péquery. I am French. I am the director of the Global Editors Network. It is the worldwide association of editors-in-chief. What is different, all of us were part of different associations, very vertical association. The World Association of Newspaper, EBU, the European Broadcast Union. Here Mario is part of ONA, Online News Association. So you have very vertical association based on platforms. And the basic idea of the Global Editors Network is to say we need to be transversal. And so we have editors-in-chief from BBC, CNN, from major newspapers as Le Monde, The Guardian, New York Times, and we have also pure players, Huffington Post, for instance. So this is the idea of the Global Editors Network, and we are working on storytelling, and it is a reason why we are managing this session on live blogging. Close to here, and he will be the first speaker, Aron Pilhofer, so editor of interactive news at New York Times. So one of the major news sites with Huffington Post. I think you are. We are struggling with them to be the first news website in the US. And so a long tradition of live blogging, evidently. Close to me, Douglas Arelanes. He's Director of Innovation at SourceFabric. They are developing their own CMS, content management systems, Airtime, other live desk, and they have we have worked together for the Gen Live Desk, Gen and SourceFabric for developing a new generation of live blogging tool. And so he will present this live blogging tool, something very practical. And then Mario, so I think I don't have to introduce Mario Tedeschi ni Lali from La Repubblica, Gruppo L'Espresso, and they have a long tradition of live blogging, not only through the national newspaper, but also with the chain of local 18 newspapers. So you will have very different experiences. And as an introduction, before giving the floor to Aron, I would say that live blogging is really linked to storytelling. And the goal of this session is to check if really the traditional article is dead or not, if live blogging just a complement of traditional articles or replacing articles, because there is a debate on that. And also a few words about the history of live blogging. So everybody started with live blogging when the internet started. It's not new. Live blogging is not new at all. I remember I covered for Libération in France the Tour de France in 1995, and evidently we used the classical internet for saying at 5:15, 5:17, 5:20, it was live blogging, but we never used this word. So live blogging for covering sports events is very classical. And at the beginning, it was not replacing classical articles. There was no competition or no idea of having something special. In the history of live blogging, you have really three major changes for having something today sophisticated, to have something quite exhaustive. First is the explosion of social media, that the fact you can have Twitter feeds, you can have Facebook pages, you can have comments from the users is totally new. Here the storytelling is no longer the story of a journalist, of a person, of a team, a newsroom. Suddenly it becomes another story, because you can add as many as comments, new facts when they are checked to the story, and you read differently this article just because they are cut with many persons involved in the same story. So social media was the first revolution for live blogging. The second revolution is clearly commercial. You have some commercial outlets, some startups made their business with live blogging, and we can quote Scribble Live. I think it is used by La Repubblica. We can quote Cover It Live. We can quote Source Fabric. So you can make business with live blogging. Why? It's not really the software. Software are quite similar, even if Douglas will tell something different. But it's about the servers. You can during an election day, during the election of the Pope, you can have 1 million people on your servers, and here is the difference. Those firms, Scribble Live, Cover It Live, what they offer to a newspaper, to a television, to a media company, this is the capacity of traffic. And I will take an example. In France, during the election day last May 2012, it crashed. So if you don't have the big servers, but really big, live blogging is dead. It's not, so the question of technology is very important. It was the second revolution, and I think really the birthday of live blogging as you know it is during the Arab Spring. And here the best example is how Al Jazeera took the thing during, not really during the Tunisia revolution, but during the Egyptian revolution and Al Tahrir Square. Here you had not only the live video from Al Tahrir Square, but they were welcoming comments, they were welcoming really using live blogging as a way to cover a revolution. And until now, it was a model. It was new, and all newsrooms took advantage of this coverage. And the TV guy from Al Jazeera worked very closely with the social media editor. And maybe, Aron, it is a transition. With the Boston bombing, maybe you can explain us how New York Times covered that. What was different between the coverage of the Tahrir Square 2 years ago and this story about Boston, the Boston blasts and the Boston story. So it was just an introduction to tell you that live blogging is really an interesting story, and you have business, you have readers, you have users, you have interaction, so it is part of the digital revolution. So, Aron?
Great, thank you, I'm glad to be here. Let me first tell you a little bit about who I am and the team that I run at the New York Times and why I'm talking about live blogging today. So I am editor of Interactive News. I run a team that does, well, I always say 3 things, but now it's 4 things as of this month. First, I started a team in the newsroom about 6, almost 7 years ago now, that combines technologists and journalism. So we basically build the things that our CMS cannot. And we provide for the newsroom the ability to tell stories in ways that we're very, very lucky in that we can create things, new platforms, new storytelling devices that most newsrooms don't have the capability to do. And so today I'm going to show you how we've been iterating on this idea of a live blog and extending it in some interesting, I think, interesting ways. I also run the social media team at the New York Times, the social media and the community teams at the New York Times. That's our comment desk, but also 7 journalists who are, including a social media editor, who manage our presence on social. But more than that, they're really focused on projects that are around engagement. And often, we're actually considering changing the name of the team because more of the work that they do is focused on projects that reflect conversation on nytimes.com, bringing in the conversation from social, casting out and bringing people back, than it is about, tweeting and managing accounts. And finally, just this month, I started a team around newsroom analytics that I will not talk about at all today. Today, though, I want to talk about this, which is our... and I apologize, I don't have internet here, so I'm only going to be showing you images, which are going to be less than fantastic, but you'll get the idea. This is our Oscar night dashboard, and effectively it's a live blog, but kind of a live blog on steroids. We started this about 5 years ago. This is the 5th iteration of it, and it's really where my team became interested in live blogging. The previous versions of live blogs were very, very boring, I mean, to be quite honest. From a design standpoint, they were very dull. They were just like strings of text. They didn't really have any life to them. And we wanted to do more with it. We wanted to bring in outside media. We wanted to reflect the conversation from social. But most importantly, we wanted it to be interactive. So in our case, we've taken live blogging and tried to make it into more of a true sort of second screen experience. And I know that's very much a buzzword in the journalism world, but for us, we've found this to be very, very successful. So here you see on the top a live video stream of David Carr, a media columnist, and A.O. Scott, our chief media film critic, during Oscar night. And we did this I'm sure nobody here has seen this, but if you maybe on the off chance you've seen this show, Mystery Science Theater 3000. It's a comedian who would sit in front of a lot of bad movies and make very funny comments during the actual event. And anyone who's ever watched an Oscar Oscar night knows that it is really ripe for that sort of presentation, particularly last year's with Seth MacFarlane. So that's what they were doing all night. But the problem with video, much like some of the other multimedia that we do, is it often sits separate from the content. It's like an add-on to the content. We didn't want that. We wanted to have a complete experience. So in this case, the live blog is going below. The video is going constantly through the night. And then on the right, you see sort of a Twitter module. Now, what we were doing is we were actually posing questions. David and Tony were actually talking to our folks on social, saying, hey, so in this case, which nominated film will go down as the most overlooked? And then we were bringing those responses back. This wasn't just a raw feed. This was something that we were actually curating and bringing on. So there was very much of a two-way kind of Q&A going on between the hosts and social media. And then throughout the night, you saw the live blog going. We also wanted to make this very much an interactive experience for readers. So we have done, for, again, the past 5 years, an electronic online ballot that you could come before the Oscars and you could pick who you think are going to win in each category. And then on Oscar night, when you come back, you log in and you can see on the right side, as you can see, this is my ballot. I did horribly. I got, I think, 8 out of 24 right, so I'm terrible at this. But it was scoring this in real time. And we would pipe through, if you can see there at 11:43, you can see that we would pipe through the answers. And in some cases, we would like say, you got it right, you got it wrong. So it was also kind of a personalized experience, more as much as it was anything else. So this is what we're really interested in, is creating a live blogging experience that actually is very interactive. It recognizes that we are not the only voice, we are not the only conversation. It brings that in some way, but it also provides a sort of a two-way conversation with readers. And design-wise, if you could see our old live blog design, it is horrendous. This is a much nicer experience. Again, this is an example from another example of what we call the dashboard from a presidential debate. This video streaming in the upper right, again, is the debate going on, the live blog going down the middle. But then on the right, we're doing real-time, essentially fact-checking with Q&A with readers. So you can't really see it in this view, but as this is going on, we're asking readers to say, you know, wait a minute, Mitt Romney just said something that doesn't seem right to me, or Barack Obama just said, is that right? And then sending this into us, and we had a team of reporters who were standing by doing nothing but responding to those questions in real time, sort of fact-checking in real time. And then, and this is important, that the answers were then piped back into the feed with the actual question and the person who asked it. So you get this idea, again, of kind of a two-way experience where we're adding more than just sort of this voice of God, stream of text, here's what we think, we don't care what you think kind of attitude that unfortunately pervades much of journalism. Here's our election night version of the dashboard, more data heavy with a lot of results. And I'm going to talk a lot more about Sandy, our coverage of Sandy and Boston tomorrow. I'm on a panel where we're going to talk about covering disasters, so I'm not going to go into much detail. But again, here during Hurricane Sandy, when people come to us, they're coming to us with a very different mindset. When a hurricane is screaming full speed at New York City, we are then, in many cases, not just a source of information, we are at times almost a lifeline. They're turning to us for information that potentially could save lives. And we take that responsibility very, very seriously. Now, in sort of the old school way of covering an event like this, what we would do is we would write the classic sort of lead-all story. We would keep updating that through the day, and then at the end of the day, that story would go in the newspaper, and then what would we do the next morning? Start a new one. Well, that's a terrible way to cover an event like this, where what people want to know is pretty much two things. What's going on right now that I need to know? Live blog is a particularly good device for this. So I kind of think of live blogging in a case like Sandy to be almost not exactly a news story form, but not a news story form. You know, they say journalism is the first draft of history. I think in some cases a blog like this is the first draft of journalism, where you can see reporters quickly posting things, little bits of information immediately, bringing in important bits of information from outside, curating social media channels, and getting that out to the public as quickly as possible. And much of that will end up, of course, in the next day's story. And because we own this platform, we can do things like the status update chart on the right, where you can quickly see the status of electricity in New York City, water, the bus system, you know, the kinds of things you want to know right now. Now, I'm going to admit to you, we did not come up with this idea. We stole it completely from WNYC, the local public radio affiliate, but they had this, and we were like, oh my God, head slap. We have to have this. Why not? So just, I need to give full credit where credit is due. And then finally, for Boston, we approached this a little more traditionally. Oh, one last thing about Sandy, sorry. This was the first time we had tried to do a multi-day live blog. And actually, Sandy's an interesting experiment for us because I mentioned earlier sort of the traditional approach to a story like this is the lead-all that we would write through. We didn't do it for Sandy. This was the story that led the website actually for pretty much seven straight days. This was the main story that we were pushing people to. So it has become more than just sort of an extra thing for us. This was what we were pushing people to.
It wasn't in the front page?
Oh, yeah. It was
then
led the website.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, right from the website. And believe me, because we are running those servers and because we wrote that software, we were like, please God, do not crash, you know.
And which...
It didn't crash.
Which CMS it was developed
This
by?
is, well, the front-end piece and everything that you see here is combination of Ruby on Rails, Node.js, JavaScript, HTML, CSS stuff we wrote, but it's being driven off of a feed generated from WordPress. And finally, for Boston, we did a little more traditional. We anchored our coverage on, we have a breaking news blog called The Lead. We anchored the coverage there, but we used basic modules that we had developed for Sandy. So you can see in the middle there, here's our live coverage module. That stayed up through the event, and that updates very quickly, which we're actually not capable of doing on the homepage very, very well. This was constantly updating with information. And then we're also piping that directly into other places. In fact, the mobile phone here is even harder to update in real time, which is why having that ability is so important. That's the version of that in mobile. And I think with that, I am now done.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Aron. So you could see how big media are really using live blogging. Now, the Italian experience, and Mario, you have the floor.
Thank you. It works, right. You were saying, and then Aron again said, are this live blogging, whatever, going to replace articles? Or this new articles, that's what you said, and somehow, you know, the New York Times experience with Sen is, in fact, that was our story for 7 days. I think this is something that goes back quite a while, even before, you know, blogging was even a word we knew. Repubblica had a sort of, we called it diretta, which is live reporting, back at the end of the 90s. You know, of course, short burst of text in HTML. It was as brutal as that. But then it was, you know, something that in this country was kind of invented by us, both for sporting event or running political events or, you know, developing stories. And this became a feature of the website. Personally, I think they even overused it, but which sometimes happen, you know, when you fall in love with one of the tools. But it's, you know, a very typical feature of the website of La Repubblica, which is, by the way, the number one news website here. And then it, you know, it developed a number of other sub-tools for sporting events, using, you know, data for sporting events and so on and so forth. And then we added a layer of actual live blogging with Scribble Live a few months ago, and which did not replace the other, you know, in-house, more, shall we say, editorial tools, live editorial tools, but allowed us on breaking news, continuing stories, and so on, to not only leverage our own resources, editorial resources, reporters on the field, and editorial know-how and knowledge in the newsroom, and so on, but also, you know, other sources, you know, what, you know, the public or other news sources were saying and or telling the people. And this has had a, you know, an interesting consequence on the let me call it the legacy newsroom, which we still have, because suddenly reporters, especially political reporters, in the last few months we're still in the midst of quite a large political crisis. and suddenly they discovered that they were heard, their voices were heard while things were happening, and which is not bad, and they were all excited about it. But we also, and if you have any questions about how we do it and so on, Raffaella Menichini, who's the editor in charge of this, is here in the front row, and she can help us or help you afterwards and let you know how she and they are doing this. And of course, major events like the election of the Pope or the political crisis, or major international events like the Boston bombings. In that case, for instance, they leveraged the possibility of integrating and syndicating the live blogging of the Boston Globe, for instance, and which I don't know whether this is what you would call multi-newsroom live blogging. I didn't know the name until a few days ago, but I know that's what they did. And but perhaps a more interesting instance of multi-newsroom live blogging is what we are experiencing with in another part of our company. Grupo Espresso, that's a pretty large company, and Repubblica, of course, is the flagship newspaper. But we do have a chain of 18 local newspapers, which is quite large, and they have their own, of course, digital shows and websites and so on, and they have a national newsroom that deals with all things national for the local newspapers, and they are using live blogging a lot on 3 different levels. One is the, traditional. There is a main national and international events they want to follow, just like La Repubblica, and they do that. Of course, they have their own staff. They have a staff in the newsroom. They have people on the floor, on the field, and they leverage, the other sources and aggregate it.
But it is the same live blogging feed. It is the same page as in La Repubblica.
No. These are 2 completely different shows.
Okay.
So, for instance, for the Pope, they had Repubblica had their own live blogging, and this outfit has, this is of course, they are part of the same company. It's like the Boston Globe and the New York Times. They are owned by the same company, but they are 2 different journalistic and organizations, right? Okay. So these are different journalistic organizations owned by the same company. Okay. So in this case, of course, if there are major national and international events, they will be set up and managed by the national newsroom. In certain cases, like, for instance, the national political elections, of course you have a local angle to every story, and especially developing story, because of course, local results, local politicians be elected or defeated, and, well, you name a number of possible different angles. And so in that case, they have a national live blogging feed, which is syndicated on single pages on their website, so traffic goes to them, and it's integrated, can be integrated by local or curated locally by the newsroom with their own resources and their own angle, of course. I mean, Italy is it's a pretty long, not large, but long country. And, an election in Friuli in the northeast is something quite different from the election in Sicily, even though it's a national election. So, of course, this makes for, different way of looking at what's happening. And then, of course, in some cases, local events are followed and covered by local live blogging, where they use the tool to aggregate stuff other than or together with their own people material. And one interesting thing, I don't know, we can ask Raffaella, but I think that while the, shall we say, the reporters on the field usually at La Repubblica do not use the platform as such. I mean, they don't have, the back end of Scribble Live is not used, even though it would be possible, by people on the field. They prefer to go through Twitter with a hashtag and then feed them, and then of course the newsroom would curate it and so on and so forth, edit it and so on. In the other case, it's a more mixed experience because we do have some reporters on the field using directly, straight, the back end of the platform on their mobile tools, while others, are more, well, you want to go slow with them, or they want to go slow with it, and so we use a more, indirect way. Everybody is on Twitter now. Everybody seems to think that Twitter is easy, and so we use it that way. So, and basically, what the kind of events we did, as Rafaela was mentioning before, we had the elections and the election of the Pope in the last few months. And, well, I didn't know that. I learned it just a few minutes ago. The election of the Pope had an impact on traffic, and live blogging on it that was not was more than the national elections we had, which tells you a lot, perhaps about the country, but probably a lot about the world. I mean, what is really important happening in Rome has not much to do with Italian politics, but with something else. And people, even probably people who are not Italian speakers, would probably just hit the La Repubblica's live blogging. You get a hunch of what's going on. You get links. You get you can translate stuff, and so this is quite. I would leave it at that, and then of course there are problems, and but we may perhaps talk about that later.
Thank you, Mario. So something quite different from New York Times. Now I give the floor to Douglas, Director of Innovation at SourceFabric. So SourceFabric is not a media company in the sense that they are not publishers, online publisher or print publishers. So they are producing software, open, always open software, open source. And here, so it is very complementary of the two other speeches, because you will have the point of view of someone producing the software, and where you will see where are the difficulties, you will see where are the opportunities, and sometimes a lot of opportunities are not taken by journalists yet. And so, Douglas, you have the floor. So it is a more practical part of this session.
Thank you, Bertrand. My name is Douglas Arianes. I'm a recovering journalist. I have to confess. I used to work at the LA Times back in the day, and in the 1990s, I left the LA Times working for a startup newspaper that my friends started in the Czech Republic. And, oops, let me just get my slides up here. A while ago, I've started working in the media development field, and one of the things that we noticed in working in the area of media development was that a newsroom is the same anywhere in the world, and this is one of the fundamental things that people need to remember, because what happens a lot is that, especially in when you're on deadline and you're under the kind of stress that comes with being in a newsroom. You tend to think of yourself as being in isolation. And one of the great things for our organization and for myself as a technologist has been to start to recognize the commonalities between newsrooms and between news organizations. Because this actually very closely ties with the ethos and the working method that is used in software development now, which is called open source. And so what we're doing is trying to bridge together different news organizations because they have the same technological problems. And one of the ways that we're doing that is by actually producing software that we give away for free. And so I'll talk a little bit about some of the software that we've got. We all know that newsrooms have limited resources, and this area is actually important in two ways. One is that software licenses cost a lot of money, as well as the actual ability to develop individual software functionality is something that, again, most newsrooms, unless you're very well resourced, you simply do not have. And so for us, the way forward that we have identified is to try to pool together resources as much as possible. Bertrand likes to use the term mutualization, and it means basically a sharing. It's a sharing of know-how, it's a sharing of experience, and it's a sharing of software code. At the same time, I mean, we talk a lot about reaching out to social and then bringing them back in. This is something that Aron pointed out really well. And you have to recognize that these platforms in some ways are both competition and cooperation. They're a tool that we use, but also they are working in competition. And so this is another area that we have to recognize and try to work with, but also try to compete against. What is nice to see, and what is really a useful thing, is that newsrooms have embraced live blogging. I mean, I suppose the first live blogs were probably operated by Telegraph back in the day. So this is not, again, something that's completely new. I mean, websites, as you guys have mentioned, I mean, people have been doing this for the better part of almost 20 years. So the idea of the live blog is definitely something that fits very well with the culture of the newsroom. Now, what is kind of interesting now, especially in the context of, say, WikiLeaks or offshore leaks, is the idea that newsrooms are starting to break out of their previous model of isolation, that organizations are actually starting to work together on stories that are too large for them to actually try to solve on their own. And I think that offshore leaks is a very good example of this type of work. It's one of the more recent examples. And so for me, this area of collaboration among newsrooms is a pretty interesting and fruitful area of exploration. Now, pool coverage is nothing new. Every NASA space shuttle launch, every rocket launch, all the coverage from the White House or from very large events is pool coverage. So this is also an area where newsrooms do cooperate together to share the resources so that you don't have 75 camera teams in the small White House press room. You just have one, and you assign them to provide the coverage and share it to everyone on the given day. And so pool coverage is also another sort of identifier. It's a paradigm that says this is not completely new. So about a year and a half ago, I was approached by Bertrand Pécari and the Global Editors Network to start to work on a wish list for live blogging. And they had a very long set of features and things that they had identified that they liked about various live blogging platforms, and then also some of the things that they didn't like. And one of the things that we were working on was this scenario of a conflict. When we started, it was Libya, now it's Syria. But the point is the same. One organization, let's say it's La Repubblica, has one reporter that's in one city, but another newsroom has only one reporter that's in another city. These two reporters can be working in a collaborative manner to share and to pool the kinds of coverage that they have. And this is something that we've worked with when trying to build the software that I'll show in just a second. So with Jen giving us a specification and a set of the tools that we wanted to create, we actually started to put together some software based on, again, 100% open source tools. And this software is available. It's up on GitHub for those of you who are software friendly. But what I would like to show right now is actually something that is, again, a fairly common thing among other competing platforms. And this is the idea of syndication. Storify does this very well. Scribble Live does it very well. The point is that we can pull together different posts from different places. So if, for example, if a reporter at La Repubblica prefers to use Twitter, we can bring that into the discussion. If a reporter prefers to use Instagram to post their photos, then we can pull that into the discussion as well. But at the same time, what we're starting to work on is the idea that a blog, just like a regular blog has an RSS feed, well, a live blog can also have a feed that serves as a source that you can then aggregate in many different ways. And for us, everything that we're building on is open standards. And so we're using the open JSON standard for this communication. In this example, in this graphic that I've got, the idea is that you have two blogs that are working upstream, and they're working as sources for the curator downstream to pick and choose which of the posts are most relevant. And so this is something that we think is kind of interesting because it means that you get more coverage, but it also means that you're able to do more with less. And so now I'm going to do something that they say never ever do at conferences, which is, I know, brave and stupid, which is actually to show some software running live. And so bear with me. Hopefully this will all work. This is Gen Live Desk. This is our software, and this is available right now on GitHub. You can download this for free, and provided that you have the technical chops, you can go ahead and start to use it. Now, this obviously is a demo, and one of the things that I'm going to show you is what it looks like for a sample user. And so here, this is just a sample website that we've created for this. With some lorem, some text, and there's our live coverage, just happening as we see it, right? But what is kind of interesting here is that we can actually draw from multiple different sources. And again, like I say, this is nothing new. Storify does this, Scribble Live does this as well. But for us, what we can do is we can add these new sources really quickly and easily, depending on the new source. And I mean, we've heard already, I've heard a couple of sessions talking about things like Pinterest or other new emerging platforms. And the point is that if you have one of these platforms that is very popular in your market, you can actually drop in that source fairly quickly and easily. So all I have to do when I'm ready to bring one of these things in is just click and drag and bring them over. There's a tweet, right, from earlier. Let me actually see if I can get some live stuff here. This is always dangerous, so bear with me here. I'm also working like twisted around, so so these things are dragged over and we make them live, and then we see them live on the page. Now, what is kind of interesting for us here is also that we can do this with visual stuff. So drawing photos from Instagram, thank you. Drawing photos from Instagram or drawing them from other things like YouTube, for example, when you need to bring them in for your live coverage. Now, what I'll show you here, I'll just go down and show you the chained live blogs. So I've got a test blog set up, and I've shown, here are some of the posts related to the Boston bombings. And one of the things that we were trying to show here was that we can monitor things that are happening in a remote location and bring them over from one blog to the next. And so, here's someone saying, these people make me sad. Okay, we publish, and these things go out live, and then we see them out here on our site. So the point, thank you. Thanks a lot. I'm probably driving the interpreter mad. My apologies. The point about this is that these sources can be placed in multiple places. So for a chain of newspapers, this can be very useful. For wire services, where you have multiple members, we can pool our coverage together and bring it into one place. And so this model, I think, is interesting. But what's also most important about this for us is that this is a process. And so a news organization might have one developer in-house. They might not even have a developer. They might reach outside to a developer, a programmer, somewhere in their city. Well, they can use this platform to serve as a building block for them to work on the software further. And so we really do welcome collaboration in this way. One of the things that people say in the open source world is to scratch your own itch, which means to solve your problems and to work on the things that you have that you think are specific to your needs. But what we find is that because newsrooms are the same, if this is a pain point for you, it is probably a pain point for someone else. And in this way, we can actually get to a platform that really does fit people's needs faster. One other thing that I wanted to say about the open source model that I think is significant and that Aron touched on, which is that the ownership of the platform is actually a really important part of the whole piece, because you may not like the layout that we provide. You may not like the way that the interactions work. And if it's just an embed on a page, then you're kind of stuck using only that. But if you own the platform and you own the way that the information is portrayed on the page, then you have a lot more control over how it is used and how you can make multiple forms of the same thing. And so ownership in this way is really important. And this is, again, one of the strengths of the open source model. And I think that this is what we will, this is going to be one of our strengths for the LiveDesk platform as it grows. So thank you.
Thank you, Douglas. So here it was more practical from the inside world of software and computers. Thank you. It's almost 1 hour we are speaking, so I think it's time for you to ask questions, in the sense that in the second part of the debate, so the last 30 minutes, we will have to we will have to discuss 3 main issues. So the latest trends of live blogging from an editorial point of view. So what do you think here about the changes we will have in the upcoming months and years? I think months, because to speak about the future in terms of years in the digital world is quite difficult. So in the upcoming months, we will ask questions about technology and especially servers. So if really the traffic is increasing during the live blogging sessions, and it is obvious it is increasing, but what does it change to have suddenly 10 times more people on your page, on this specific page of live blogging from a technological point of view? And the last point, because newspapers, broadcasters, they need advertising. What does it mean from a commercial point of view? Are advertisers, do they like breaking news or not? When it is about a crime, when it is about a bombing, maybe not. But in the same times, if the traffic is 10 times more than usually, it's good for them. So the question will be how to integrate advertising in this kind of live blogging sessions. So, but first, can some, here, the young lady here. So if you have questions at this stage of the debate. One here.
Hello, I'm from the Danish Broadcast Corporation, the website, and we use Scribble Live in our live coverage. And I would like to ask Aron if you have what thoughts you have done about the writing in the live blogs. How many reporters can blog at the same time from various spaces? If you have, for instance, some big event, can you be in various places? And actually, I would like to know if the storytelling is the language, the journalism, because I can be a little worried about the journalism if it's only the facts and if the storytelling is disappearing in the live blogging.
Well, so there are, as you saw, we do live blogging for a lot of different kinds of events, some of which are breaking news, where really, truly, you just want facts and short bursts of information. And then sometimes, for like an Oscars, the writing the style, the tone can change dramatically. It can be a little bit more sarcastic or snarky or whatever. I think the challenge that we've had and still have to some degree is that just like any story form, live blogging demands a certain kind of writing. And you can have the most amazing journalists in the world who can turn a phrase and churn out a 2,500 word masterpiece, and cannot write 140 characters to save their lives. And we find this a lot. So it takes a little while to get people kind of used to the idea that you don't need to write this long. In fact, that's worse. You don't want this. You want this. And, brevity in this case is kind of the challenge for a lot of our reporters. But I think we're getting much, much better at it. Oh, about the number of reporters. For us, it's really not so much a technical limitation. It's more a limitation on how many people we want to be throwing at a reader at any given time. So we tend to keep the number of collaborators pretty low. I don't know the exact number, but it doesn't get much beyond like 4 or 5. Maybe on an election night we'll have more than that, but we don't, you don't want to have 27 names just suddenly coming at people like, from all sides. You want to have some amount of consistency and some idea of who the heck I'm listening to right now. I mean, the thing about a live blog is it's about as close to broadcast as you can get in the context of text. And much like a broadcast, you don't want to have like 19 anchors all like just throwing things at you. That gets incredibly confusing. So we've tended to keep the numbers pretty low.
Something to add, Mario, on that question about the quality of text, if storytelling disappearing through live blogging?
Well, if that's the question, I didn't understand the question as being that. I mean, if that's the question, of course it's not. I mean, there are so many different forms of storytelling and journalism making, if I may. The great thing about this circumstances in which we are living, professionally speaking, is that, the problem is to choose which one or which ones we should be better using in very specific circumstances. So I think that long form journalism, for instance, has a place to be in digital journalism. I mean, our friends there have been doing and winning Pulitzer Prizes for that. and we do our own share in this country. But of course, there are events, continuing news that ask for a different kind of storytelling. So no, I don't think there is any problem like that.
And in your media organization, do you need specific talents? So someone in the future who will be very specific to this kind of live blogging, or for instance, David Carr, so a very well-known journalist at New York Times, a media in charge of media, doing everything. He's tweeting, he's doing live blogging, he's doing long articles, long reports, inquiries. Is there a kind of model, in the sense, something more specific? It's a specific talent, or finally, no, we will take the best journalist for that?
No, I think you need a specific. I mean, it's sort of going back to the question. Not everybody is a great blogger, and certainly not everybody is a great live blogger. We have many who are, So yeah, there's definitely a skill necessary there to bring the right sort of social media presence into the feed without overwhelming people. You need somebody who's got the right touch there. So that's almost sort of an editing skill more than anything else. To have a compelling, single second screen experience, kind of like our Oscars, where you have the live video, the related Twitter, and the live blog all working together, which was a very difficult thing to achieve. You need to both have the technical chops in-house to do that. You need to have somebody who acts as almost, and this ended up being my deputy and one of the deputy editors on the culture desk. You need to almost have a producer, not in the sense of a web producer, but almost in the sense of a television producer. Yes. Someone who's going to produce the entire show. Otherwise, it just becomes this sort of cacophony.
It's a live show.
Yeah, very much.
On our side, of course, we have Rafaela is at La Repubblica is doing that with others, and so yes, there is it's going as always. Specialization is going to work one way or the other. Right?
Hello, my name is Fabio. I work with El Centro, one of the local newspapers by L'Espresso Group. We try to get familiar with Scribble Live. We've been doing live blogging but with Scribble Live. What I wanted to know if Repubblica and L'Espresso are actually considering other possible alternatives to Scribble Lives. But
why? You are not satisfied with...
I'm a bit familiar with, but they're probably causing problems with mobile devices on Samsung, something not which is not Apple's stuff.
I don't know of any plans right now. I mean, it's but whether Rafaela has any answer to that.
I don't know. Frankly, I don't think they're working on an in-house system. Right now, we are working more in better embedding the Scribble Live platform in our management system, CMS. That's what we're trying to do in order also to keep for the future the history of all our live bloggings, which is also important.
And here we touch this question about mobile. Is the future of live blogging talk about the second screen? So how is it possible to have, according to you, Douglas, Aron, and Mario, is live blogging, because what you have shown is quite complex. You have left, middle, right. You have you need complementary information. You need interactivity. So it works quite well for a screen, for a big screen. So how do you imagine that on tablets and on smartphones?
So for us, I think we learned a lot from Sandy, where we streamed the exact feed that we had on the web into mobile and iPad, and I think that was a mistake. And the reason is a lot of the things that work, the sort of more sort of featurey things, slightly longer, maybe 500 words, something like that, that work pretty well in a live blog online and a larger screen, are terrible on a phone and just don't work at all. So I think that the next, if we're sort of looking forward to where we might go with this in future, I think we might create a little bit more stratification among the various devices. We might have a more iPhone or phone-friendly feed, and a feed for a wider screen, and those might have different content. The other thing we certainly want to do is start taking advantage of what we know about the user, and that may be a logged-in user, and we might know quite a bit about them, so we might be able to personalize content a little bit more, more than an Oscar ballot, for example. Like I could think in a sort of breaking news situation, if we know where they live or we know where they are, if we can take advantage of that, geolocation, we can provide much more contextually relevant information quickly to them. So I think those are the two areas we're looking at.
Well, of course, mobile is the future, it's already the present to one extent. I must tell you, I'm not aware of any major new product that we are planning. But of course, we are thinking about it. I mean, we are still very much web-oriented, and we are aware that that's not enough.
First screen.
So this is it. But, mobile, in this, speaking about live blogging, has, it's not just on the front end. It's mostly on the back end. I mean, people in the field are using mobile. So you were mentioning possible technical snarls and problems and servers. Well, happily enough, we did not have major server problems in the last few years, even though, the Publico was born out of a major crashing success because in the election of '96, it was the first experiment on the web. It went crashing, and I said, well, there is a market there, right? And but the problem is bandwidth. Especially where major events are happening. Reporters and people, just people on the field, the ones you rely on for your information and news, sometimes are just cut off. This is especially true in this country, where, the bandwidth problem, it's a big problem, and, even in major cities, in the central cities. So that's one, shall we say, technical problems that borders into editorial, because, of course, you have to perhaps devise a way and find back channels, whatever, carrying pigeons, I don't know, but it's something that helps you out that way.
And Douglas, yes, about mobile developments.
I wanted to add a couple of things there. One is that platforms enable, but also platforms limit. And so when you don't own your platform, you don't really have the ability to form how it can be used for the third or fourth screen. One of the things that we've noticed is that because we have open APIs, we're able to actually come up with new solutions. And on the point about low bandwidth, in about a week and a half, my colleague and I will be going to Mozambique, where we're going to be deploying this in a citizen journalism context. And there the primary channel is SMS. And so we have SMS, which we're integrating into the system as well to allow for inputs from citizens, but also potentially from reporters as well. And so if you have an open platform, you're able to actually do more with it and faster.
Okay, and you will change the live desk because of this new platform, mobile, based on mobile, or not? Or do you consider that the structure is here and it is just a layer, one more layer?
No, everybody has a different experience that they desire, and I think that it's also what Aron is pointing to as well is that different types of stories require a different user experience. If you're sitting and experiencing the Oscar night on a tablet, that's going to be very different than having only a mobile phone and being caught in a big snowstorm. And so being able to shape the experience according to the content that you have, I think is also going to be one of the areas that the development will have to take into account. One other thing I was going to mention about mobile is that mobile curation is one of the areas that we're doing some work on right now, where you may not necessarily even have the time to get to a full big computer, and you need to curate from the field. And so for us, this is something else that we're working on right now.
Okay, before giving again the floor to the audience, I would like to take the example of the last week Boston events, in the sense that live blogging was used by everybody, any platform, any media organization made its own live blogging. And what appeared, because we are in the US, and the engagement is very high, is that you can read on Reddit, you can read on Twitter, maybe the terrorist is my neighbor, maybe the terrorist is just the home close to my house. And so I think one of the major problem we have now with live blogging is about not only fact checking, but you have now so many people using social media that you can denounce your neighbor, you can manipulate the information. So how do you, is curation becoming more important or not? And how could you solve this issue if it is a real problem according to you?
I mean, yeah, of course. And I mean, as you may or probably know, during those hectic hours when everyone was trying to figure out who the bombers were, you know, there were some self-appointed folks on Reddit and elsewhere who, you know, called out quite infamously now people who were absolutely not responsible for this. They got it dead wrong. Now, having said that, Reddit certainly does not have a monopoly on getting it dead wrong. CNN had a really rough outing. We reported things that ultimately proved not to be true. So I think it's more important than ever. But you know, we were talking about this at a panel yesterday. What I think live blogging and other sorts of tools provide for an organization like the New York Times is an opportunity to respond quickly, to correct facts, to correct things that we might have gotten wrong, to be present, but not necessarily first. I don't think people come to the New York Times because they know we're going to be first all the time. Racing to be first, I think, is foolish in this era where a scoop lasts about 36 seconds on the web. It just does. Now, I think that the value that a site like New York Times can provide is trust and accuracy. And if we don't have those two things, we're dead. So, yes.
From Larry, is curation becoming more important in this live blogging
it
environment?
Is, of course it is. I must tell you frankly, I mean, I take my Grupo Espresso hat off, and I'm speaking like, you know, an analyst, you know. As Aron was saying, social media are not the only ones who get things wrong. We know that perfectly well in this country. Traditional media have been getting things wrong for a long, long time. And the problem is what the new environment can teach us and help us do is to face it and acknowledge that we may be wrong, just as much as the others can. So we should perhaps, of course, we are curating, and we should be doing more of that. And of course, we will be curating with as much editorial wisdom as we can have. But we should try and apply the same wisdom to our own may I use the word broadcast that you used before in these cases, and actually plainly correct stuff that when we understand that we got it wrong.
I'd like to mention also from a technical standpoint, one of the areas that is being led by Internews is an area of citizen news verification. There's actually a Google group that is working toward a citizen journalism verification standard. We're participating in this along with Internews and Storyful and Medan and a number of other players in the space. And the idea is to try to create a set of rules by which, especially for citizen journalism, you can assign a score of believability that would be the output of this type of algorithm to help give an editor at least a little bit of guidance on whether or not a post coming from the public is believable or not. And that's a little different than a report that's coming from a staff member that's erroneous. But the same mechanisms can be used there as well. So the Google group is called News Verification, and you can check that out on the Google groups as well.
Okay, so still 10 minutes remaining for questions. Nevertheless, I would like to address the problem of technological issues and commercial opportunities. So it will be one question, and then the audience will have the floor. If the traffic is 10 times more during those events, so the trend will be really to set up more and more live blogging sessions. So do you consider that the news organization, because they need more traffic, they need more presence on the web, is there a trend for more and more live blogging, or do you will find some blockages, some restraints for that?
So I would say that for live events and for big breaking news events like Boston, people are going to turn to the New York Times. They're going to read stories. They're going to look at photos. They're going to look at the live blog. I wouldn't say that the live blog itself is necessarily the thing that's driving the traffic, although a live blog and a breaking news event and a breaking news moment is going to be where people go quite naturally. I would say, though, on the commercial side, we actually have had quite a bit of success with monetizing. I hate that word, so I apologize to everybody.
Why?
It's such a terrible word. We've had great success. Monetizing
Getting revenue.
Getting revenue. Thank you. On some of our live blogs, like the Oscars, that one does really well.
Tiffany.
And I'll tell you the secret: as long as it doesn't leave this room, and we all have to be friends here, because I'm going to get in big trouble if you tweet this in any language but Italian, because I know nobody in New York is going to know what the hell I'm talking about if you do. But if you call it a live blog, advertisers will run away from you as fast as they can. But if you take that very same thing, you put a ballot on it, you put some live video at the top, and a really cool little Twitter module, and you call it a dashboard, all of a sudden they're like, wow, I want to sponsor that. So we actually have done pretty well. We did one for the Super Bowl that did extremely well this year, like high six figures well. Again, be kind. Do not tweet that. Do not tweet that. I'm looking at you. I'm looking at everybody out there. Be nice to me. And the Oscars does very, very well every year. So we've had some success, but you have to kind of package it in a way that makes it more than just a live blog.
One thing,
yes,
one thing that we've worked on that is also putting advertising inside of the live stream. So again, if you own your platform, you can actually own how the ads and how the advertiser content is being sent to you. One of our clients is in Basel in Switzerland, and one of the things that yesterday Basel had a football match, and we were joking about having every goal sponsored by a beer maker. So, this goal sponsored by Carlsberg. So, but the point there is that you can put things into the live coverage as well. but you have to own the platform in order to do that.
And when there is no goal, it's a problem.
Well, the fans of the opposing team would be gladly going to drink beer next time. I doubt about that. But I'm not privy to that kind of stuff, so I really don't know. What I know, generally speaking, it's what Aron was saying, that sponsorships are the best ways to get money out of it. And generally speaking, we should never, ever forget in what kind of business we are. In what kind of professional business we are. We are in the business of telling people what's happening, right? So first we try to do that as well as we can, and as much as our, the people who like to refer to us want us to be. Then, of course, we have to find ways to pay our salaries at least, and everything. And we have to look about that. But and I'm pretty sure that this is one tool that has to be used. Live blogging. If the tools are there and people like them and enable us to tell our stories, we should use them.
Okay, so you can understand that live blogging it is still arts and crafts. We are defining what it is. You have very big organizations, but in the same time you have sophisticated software. But in the same time, we are inventing. Sandy was a step. At the Boston bombings was another step. You change your mind. It's evolving. So there is nothing in the marble. And that is the interesting story with live blogging. So one question, one here and one here. They are coming with a microphone.
Hi, I'm from Scribble Live, as you guys all know.
Ah.
One thing, it's about monetization, about revenue, that live blogging is different from static articles, is the engagement time, how people stay on page much, much longer. So while in a static article, people would go, maybe read an article, maybe read a portion of it and move away. With the live blogging model, it's closely associated to the broadcast model, where people stay on page 50 minutes, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, and however long the story is running. At Scribble Live, as an average across all our clients, and we have quite a few, it's between 12 and 14 minutes. And this is, obviously you have sporting events which are much longer, and people know they're coming, so people will go on page for longer. But also you have the events that people come in and out. So on average, it's a very, very long time in internet. So in terms of live blogging, that's commercially, I think that's what really changes. And calling a dashboard and putting things that engage people for longer, that's where you can successfully monetize, with apologies, live blogging.
Thank
just
you.
By coincidence, I wanted to make the same point that Casimir just made, because what we are competing for right now is not only people's money, but I think is people's attention and time, where we have an audience that is information from, mainly from Facebook and from social network, and not only from us, big outlets. Our focus is to offer the complete experience and to offer the news in the most beautiful way we can. I think that one of the key words is beautification of news.
What is
beautification of the news?
Beautification.
I mean, a page like the one at the Oscars, but also a page of real service like the one you did for Sandy, or a page that we did, pages that we did with through Scribble Live, offering multimedia contents and contribution from the readers are also engaging viewing experiences where people want to stay longer and longer, and that I think is very appealing. That's probably the future. I want to add about the language thing that is very important, I think. What we do is to create a unique file where at the end of the day we have also the wrap-up of the story under the same link. So you have the history, the Scribble Live of the day, and a short story that is also the article that will remain on Google as the complete experience.
May I add just one little note of caution on the editorial side, of the management editorial side, especially small organizations. When you decide to go live for an event, be sure that you have enough resources, time, people, to follow through. A soccer match, it's 90 minutes, all right? So that's how long it's going to be. The election of the President of the Republic in this country took much longer than we thought. All right, so you open up your live blogging in the morning, thinking that perhaps a couple of days it will be over, so yes, we can handle that. Then it runs into the weekend. Are you going to close it before the president is elected? Of course not. So there is, this is a great tool. You have to think wisely when and how to use it.
And one more question, but it will be the last one. And 3 weeks ago, you had in the same time on The Guardian, so Guardian News and Media, on the Guardian website, 4 different live blogs running together. One was a hearing at the parliament, another a football match, another one about politics. So it's not only the problem how to run one live blogging, but at the Guardian, so a big newsroom, a very important newsroom, they run several live blogs at the same period, the same day. So it's really becoming more and more important. One more question. I said you are asking the last question.
I just more making a point. I'm a live blogger myself. I've been live blogging for ages now, and the challenge is for newsrooms. If there is like something happening, like the presidential elections and the Boston manhunt last Friday, for the first time after months, despite myself being a live blogger, I was trying to follow the news on true live blogs instead of Twitter, of true organizations, which I'm not going to mention here, because I was just tired of the whole buzz and the whole confusion you get on Twitter. I just want a reliable source of information I can just follow. Even with a couple of seconds or minutes of delay, but some accurate information. I think that is the challenge. Steal traffic away from Twitter or from other news, social media, which in the first place stole that from newspapers. If you're able to do that kind of multimedia narration, people will start trusting you. It will take months, but people will start acknowledge that and come eventually.
Boy, I just could not agree with more with everything you said. If you were following Twitter as I was, it was almost impossible to get anything worthwhile out of Twitter during those moments of absolute just frenzy. And again, this goes back to kind of what I was saying earlier about the role of news organizations like the New York Times, like sort of traditional news organizations, is we have this opportunity to be the place where people go to kind of help filter through that stuff and just sort of like separate the signal and the noise a little bit. I could not agree with you more.
Okay, so I was asked by Christopher Porter to close in time. We are 5 minutes late. So that's the end of this session. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much. Fabric. So you can make business with live blogging. Why? It's not really the software. Software are quite similar, even if Douglas will tell something different. But it's about the servers. You can during an election day, during the election of the Pope, you can have 1 million people on your servers, and here is the difference. Those firms, Scribble Live, Cover It Live, what they offer to a newspaper, to a television, to a media company, this is the capacity of traffic. And I will take an example. In France, during the election day last May 2012, it crashed. So if you don't have the big servers, but really big, live blogging is dead. It's not, so the question of technology is very important. It was the second revolution, and I think really the birthday of live blogging as you know it is during the Arab Spring. And here the best example is how Al Jazeera took the thing during, not really during the Tunisia revolution, but during the Egyptian revolution. And Al Tahrir Square, a news site with Huffington Post, I think you are, we are struggling with them to be the first news website in the US. And so a long tradition of live blogging, evidently. Close to me, Douglas Arelanes. He's business, no. Director of Innovation at SourceFabric. They are developing their own CMS, content management systems, Airtime, other live desk, and they have, we have worked together for the Gen Live Desk, Gen and SourceFabric for developing a new generation of live blogging tool. And so he will present this live blogging tool, something very practical. And then Mario, so I think I don't have to introduce Mario Tedeschi ni Lali from La Repubblica, Gruppo L'Espresso, and they have a long tradition of live blogging, not only through the national newspaper, but also with the chain of local 18 newspapers. So you will have very different experiences. And as an introduction, before giving the floor to Aron, I would say that, allora, who is here? My name is Bertrand Péquery. I am French. I am the director of the Global Editors Network. It is the worldwide association of editors-in-chief. What is different, all of us were part of different associations, very vertical association. The World Association of Newspaper, EBU, the European Broadcast Union. Here Mario is part of ONA, Online News Association. So you have very vertical association based on platforms. And the basic idea of the Global Editors Network is to say, we need to be transversal, and so we have editors-in-chief from BBC, CNN, from major newspapers as Le Monde, The Guardian, New York Times, and we have also pure players, Huffington Post, for instance. So this is the idea of the Global Editors Network, and we are working on storytelling, and it is a reason why we are managing this session on live blogging. Close to here, and he will be the first speaker, Aron Pilhofer, so editor of interactive news at New York Times. So one of the major, having something today sophisticated, to have something quite exhaustive. First is the explosion of social media, that the fact you can have Twitter feeds, you can have Facebook pages, you can have comments from the users is totally new. Here the storytelling is no longer the story of a journalist, of a person, of a team, a newsroom. Suddenly it becomes another story, because you can add as many as comments, new facts when they are checked to the story, and you read differently this article just because they are cut with many persons involved in the same story. So social media was the first revolution for live blogging. The second revolution is clearly commercial. You have some commercial outlets, some startups made their business with live blogging, and we can quote Scribble Live. I think it is used by La Repubblica. We can quote Cover It Live. We can quote Source. Live blogging is really linked to storytelling. And the goal of this session is to check if really the traditional article is dead or not, if live blogging just a complement of traditional articles or replacing articles, because there is a debate on that. And also a few words about the history of live blogging. So everybody started with live blogging when the internet started. It's not new. Live blogging is not new at all. I remember I covered for Libération in France the Tour de France in 1995, and evidently we used the classical internet for saying at 5:15, 5:17, 5:20, it was live blogging, but we never used this word. So live blogging for covering sports events is very classical. And at the beginning, it was not replacing classical articles. There was no competition or no idea of having something special. In the history of live blogging, you have really three major changes for